At 35,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean, everything suddenly went wrong in the cockpit. This is the true story of Air France Flight 447. On the night of May 31st, 2009, Air France Flight 447 took off from Rio de Janeiro, bound for Paris. The aircraft departed at 20:29 UTC, right on schedule. It was an Airbus A330-203, a modern long-haul jet just 4 years old at the time. And on board were 216 passengers and 12 crew members. In the cockpit were 3 pilots. Captain Marc Dubois, 58 years old with over 10,000 flight hours. First Officer David Robert, 37 years old with roughly 6,500 flight hours, acting as the pilot monitoring. And First Officer Pierre Cedric Bonin, 32 with about 2,900 hours of flying. He was the pilot flying the plane. Because this was an overnight flight, the pilots were rotating rest. By the time aircraft reached cruise altitude, around the 35,000 feet, the captain had left the cockpit to rest. The 2 first officers were flying. Everything was normal, and a few hours later, as the aircraft crossed the equator, it entered an area pilots know well, the Intertropical Convergence Zone. Large storm systems, tall cloud tops, nothing unusual for the route. Then at 2:10 AM UTC, everything changed. Without warning, the autopilot disconnected. That matters because autopilots don't disengage unless the aircraft no longer trusts its data. Almost instantly, alarm filled the cockpit. The aircraft stopped agreeing with itself about how fast it was flying. What had happened was subtle but dangerous. High altitude ice crystals interfered with aircraft Pitot probes. They're small sensors that measures the airspeed basically. A Pitot probe works like a narrow tube. The faster the aircraft moves, the more air pressure enters it, and that's how the speed is calculated. When those probes were affected, the speed data become unreliable. The aircraft no longer trusted its own information. And when that happens, automation steps aside. Now the plane had to be flown manually, in turbulences, in darkness, over the open ocean. This is where things began to unravel. As the autopilot disconnected, the aircraft began pitching upwards under pilot's input. The pilot flying pulled back on the side. It's an instinct reaction, but at 35,000 feet, pulling up is dangerous. The air is thin, the margin for error is small. The aircraft began losing speed. Then the warning sounded. Stall, stall, stall. The Airbus A330 had entered a loss of lift condition. The wings were no longer producing enough lift to keep the aircraft flying. Inside the cockpit, nothing looked familiar. Some airspeed reading disappeared, others briefly returned, the stall warning stopped, then came back. And at high altitude, a stall doesn't look the way pilots expect it to. And that confusion proved fatal. The captain rushed back into the cockpit. For the next 4 minutes, the aircraft remained in a deep loss of lift condition. The nose stayed high, The engines were running at producing thrust, but thrust alone can't fix a stall. The wings never recovered lift. No one clearly recognized what was happening. At 2:14 a.m. UTC, still pitched upward, Air France Flight 447 struck the Atlantic Ocean. There was no mayday call, just silence. Silence over the Atlantic. When the aircraft failed to arrive in Paris, the world began searching. Ships, aircraft, satellites. And then debris was found within days. Bodies were recovered, but the main wreckage and the black box were gone. And for 2 years, no one knew exactly what had happened. The years of speculation. During those years, speculation filled the gap. Some believed the aircraft had broken apart inside a storm. Others suggested a lightning or extreme turbulence. There were stories about a structural failure or aircraft simply falling out of the sky. Without the black box, no one could say for sure. Modern jets weren't supposed to just vanish. What the black box revealed was really interesting. In 2011, nearly 4,000 meters below the ocean surface, the wreckage was finally found. And soon after, the black boxes. When investigators decoded the data, the mystery disappeared. There was no explosion, no in-flight breakup, no sabotage. The aircraft was flyable until the very end. The crash was caused by a chain of events. A temporary loss of reliable airspeed data, an autopilot disengagement at cruise altitude, confusing cockpit warnings, and a stall that was never properly corrected. Nothing dramatic, just a situation that spiraled faster than the crew could recover. Investigators also identified a broader issue. Modern pilots were highly trained to manage automated systems, but sudden manual flight at high altitude without automation was something that few had experienced in real life. Air France Flight 447 changed the aviation. Pilot training was rewritten, airspeed sensors were redesigned, producers were updated worldwide, because on June 1st, 2009, 228 people lost their lives in just over 4 minutes. And the lesson was uncomfortable but clear. Even the most advanced aircraft still depend on human understanding, especially when automation steps aside. That's what the black box revealed. If you want aviation stories told with facts, context, and respect for the cockpit, please subscribe to this channel. Hear the data, understand the decisions, and decide for yourself. I'm Captain A, and thank you so much for watching this video.